Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Nasdaq Dorsey Wright podcast. David and I are on here. David, last day of August, I just realized right now. Are you looking forward to September?
Probably maybe more than most in terms of just things that are happening. But generally speaking, most of the time when people think of September in our industry, it doesn't give any type of positive
Yeah.
feelings. So,
Yeah.
I feel like more so my excitement for September is the things that I have planned, not necessarily market related. So that's where I would go with that topic of conversation. But
Yeah.
you're right. September is upon us, and it's often one of the toughest years for, or pardon me, toughest months for the market, and we've already kind of been in a tough month. So it's an interesting position to be in heading into September for sure.
Yeah. I relate to, like, as an investor, I'm not too excited for the month of September. I think any technician out there has pointed out the fact is one of the weakest months, but personally, I'm like right there with you. Got a family vacation later this month. We'll be in Vegas for our symposium that we'll get to see a lot of our clients, a lot of people that probably
Hmm.
listen to this podcast. So certainly things to look forward to there. I think we have some exciting news from a variety of perspectives at the symposium to share. So yeah, plenty of stuff looking positive there. I'd say market wise, recently we've seen some positive action as well. Maybe not on the economic front. We were just talking about, I guess we're back to the whole like bad news is good news thing for the market. We saw some revisions lower, and then market seemed to take it well so far.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because in the conversation that we were having, in the fact that we've had such a tough month and 2022 is still kind of lingering in our head. Many will still kind of think a recession is in the offing. So there's a lot of negativity there, and the fact that whenever we're getting not good economic data, it's almost good news for us. So it's kind of a strange situation to be in because if we're in a bull market and we get this type of economic data, the market's likely pulling back. But actually, this week we've seen a nice little rebound out of most U.S. equity indexes with a lot of the economic data coming out. We actually saw the S&P 500 give its seventh consecutive buy signal. Looking at its chart, we saw the Nasdaq Composite as well as the Nasdaq 100 return to buy signals, and even saw the Russell 2000 return to a buy signal after a technically violated trend last week. But it is worth giving a shout out to the S&P 500 for making that seventh consecutive buy signal because it isn't often that you see that many consecutive buy signals on any particular chart, much
Yeah,
less the U.S. equity, this major U.S. equity index chart.
yeah, I was about to say, Miles, our colleague, one of the other analysts here, is putting a piece in the report this evening talking about that seventh consecutive buy signal streak for the S&P 500. Ian did the sixth, Miles did the seventh. Maybe if we get the eighth, somebody else does the eighth. But he was saying if the index were to give that eighth consecutive buy signal, the streak would join the exclusive company of only two previous times, 1980 and 2021, where you saw eight consecutive buy signals on the S&P default chart. So that would be rare for sure. I think that kind of again continue to emphasize weight of the evidence. One sell signal after eight consecutive is probably not necessarily end of some longer term uptrend, but it wouldn't be surprising given that streaks typically don't last much longer than this in terms of the buy signals.
Right. And I mean, there would be some, what we would say, anticipated after a streak like that consolidation, maybe even a little bit more of a pullback. But, it is something that looking at that technical picture of the S&P right now, there's been nice support at 4340, 4360, and we see that bullish support line moving up to the lower 4100 level with recent action. So, there's support there, even if we do kind of go through a consolidation and obviously thinking about moving into September, that is in the realm of possibility,
Yeah,
especially with the action we can
yeah.
see in September a lot.
And I'm going to
Um,
add on here too that talking about the S&P, if you spin that out to the 50-point chart, you also got a reversal up into X's there, put in a higher bottom at 4350, which I've really liked that 50-point chart this year and
mhm.
over the past couple of years. That's been pretty good. And that 4350 area is just slightly around where you were saying we are expecting to see some support. And that makes sense. That was your August 2022 high. So all of that still looks pretty healthy to me right here. So I cut you off. You can say something else.
No, you're totally fine. I mean, and this rally that we've seen out of U.S. equity indexes has also helped us out on the indicator front. We've seen some of these shorter term indicators like the 10-week and the NYSE high low reverse back into X's from in the case of the high low, it was right at 30%. We've seen it pick back up to that 40% level. So, in other words, or in simplest terms, seeing more stocks making 52-week highs than the combination of those making 52-week highs and lows. So in again, even simpler terms, more upside participation is what we're seeing, at least in the short term. And confirmation of that is seen with the 10-week reversing up, showing that stocks are trading above their 50-day moving averages, or moving. You're seeing that number increase of those stocks trading above their 50-day moving averages. But it is key looking at these indicators right now that a lot of the shorter ones are coming from lower levels, right around 30%, possibly lower in some cases, but many of the bullish percents as well as the PT indicators still sit around that 50% mark. And actually, a lot of the PT indicators still maintain in a column of X's as well. So longer term picture would still say maintains positive, and even intermediate term still very positive. And now we're getting the reversals back from the short term, so at least giving us some level of silver lining here briefly, now that we're entering what is a tough month, or what has historically been a tough month, somewhat of possible reprieve in the horizon that we might hope for, if you will.
That is interesting that you mentioned that we're getting some of the short term reversals coming up into a historically weak season of the market may catch some people off guard. Also, I mean, we just talk about how routine so far that past pullback has been 5% ish. Call it exhale, give or take a few percent for the other indices. A lot of the short-term indicators that you mentioned didn't get down to like washout levels by any means, but low enough where you say like, okay, we're below a historical average for the short-term indicator. So like very
Right.
routine, technically like very normal behavior from what we've seen so far. And then talk about moving averages. I was talking to a client earlier today about the 1040, which is a what
Mm-hmm.
percentage of funds, so ETFs, mutual funds, their 10-week average is above their 40-week. So that's another way of saying the 50-day and the 200-day. That's for all equity funds. It's at 86%, which was shocking to me. He was saying it was close to 90, and I didn't believe him at first. So I had to look it up, and it's true. 86% of equity funds have their 50-day above their 200 right now. So talk about kind of longer term participation. That's there as well.
Well, in many ways, that adds to further evidence that even when we're heading into this kind of tough month of the year, we've got a lot of boxes checked off that are fairly positive right now. And at least from my market memory over the past decade, it's not been all that often that, we've seen this much positive action. Now, I say that 2022 was one of those years in which we saw some positive action in August, ultimately roll over into September. But really, in many cases, I would say this August has felt a little bit different than last, and the fact that we saw pretty much most things pull back. It wasn't really one thing kind of rallied to pick up the slack, but we saw the broader market from international to domestic to commodities, many things pulled back during August. So there wasn't really anything immune, if you will, to this recent market action. So coming into September, seeing kind of where the indicators are sitting after this month we had, it could definitely be another month in store in which we get quite a bit of possible volatility out of it. But
The VIX
it,
does
it's it
the
is
VIX does
interesting to
tend to
me to
keep
see
going
it.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me. Like I keep circling back to it at the fact that there's more boxes checked right on the right side of the thing, or pros, if you will, than there are things listed in the con column.
Mm.
And coming into September, it not I would even say historically in some bull markets, there's probably not even that level of confidence looking at some of the indicators, but.
Yeah,
Maybe am I reaching for straws because I want some level of confidence? Possibly, because it's been a year in which we've wanted to continue to look for confirmation that what we're seeing in terms of this rally is going to continue. That it's not really meeting its end, and I feel like that's a question we get a lot of times. As soon as we see some type of rally or pickup, it's sort of calls to that we're receiving to possibly get ready for defense. But right now it still shows us that being offensive is very much the play.
Yeah.
So
I've
a
seen
lot of
some
interesting things.
yeah, I've seen some anecdotes about people saying like this is like the most hated bull market start so far in history. And I don't know, again, in history, that's a pretty extreme statement, but I think anecdotally, I've heard that a
Yes.
number of times now that people just hate it. They don't believe it. Investor sentiment over the past few weeks hasn't spiked to the highs that we saw. So the 1 year bullish high for like the AAII bulls was up at 51%, and that was at like mid-July. Since August, of course, it came down as sentiment tends to follow market performance. But even over the past week, when the market picked up, bullish sentiment really hasn't picked up that much. So you don't see too much euphoria just yet. And Dave and I, of course, as you're listening to this, you can probably get the feel that he and I both would see the weight of the technical evidence being pretty constructive for at least domestic markets right now. I know plenty of people that I respect their opinion greatly that they would say the evidence leans contrary for the technicals right now. So there's different things to look at for sure, but the way that we see it, I'm sure there's some confirmation bias on both sides. Things that we believe we kind of look for, and then it confirms our notion. But overall, I'm just rambling, but those are my thoughts.
No, it's we've sort of gone back and forth here on a few rambling points just because it's been one of those weeks where you didn't get a whole lot of reaction to economic data, which again was kind of it's a weird sensation for us, especially what feels like over the past, we'll call it 12 to 18 months. People have marked these days on their calendars, as being
Yeah,
prepared for them, what may
Michael.
happen.
Yeah, Michael Normile, the U.S. economist for Nasdaq, who's been on the podcast a few times, he called the Fed meetings like the Super Bowl for the economists, which was fantastic. That will forever go in our like Hall of Fame quotes on this podcast.
Yeah, and it's also interesting you bring up the fact that people are kind of anecdotally calling this the most hated bull market. I did sort of chuckle because I remember in my early days of Dorsey Wright when I started, and this was, a decade plus ago, that many had made that claim about that bull market in that situation coming off of the '09 bottom, that it was the
Oh,
most
I'm sure.
hated,
Yeah.
it was propped up, so on and so forth. But I won't get on that tangent. It just sort of made me chuckle because it feels like in some context that within the confines of a bull market, there's always going to be somebody trying to make the call that it's getting ready to head lower.
Which is probably good. It's probably healthy.
Yeah, at least
If
healthy, at
there
least
wasn't,
healthy
I'd be
to
concerned.
yeah, if everybody believes the market's going to continue to head higher, that's probably the memo that we're all wrong. But
Yeah. Yeah.
nonetheless, we have seen some positive action out of, like we've talked about, mostly US equities. There's been quite a few stocks that are now kind of back in actionable territory. Will mentioned on the fund side, we're seeing pretty decent amount of upside participation within the fund space, seeing similar participation within stocks. And, even looking at some of these larger names within the Dow right now, I mean, there's some opportunity there that
Yeah. What do
even
you got?
say a month ago wasn't quite there. We were
First
looking.
string. Who's on your first string starting lineup for the Dow?
Oh, my first string starting lineup for the Dow today would be Visa. Five
Vanguard.
for fiver,
Yeah.
4 consecutive buy signals recently, rallying to match its July 2021 rally high there at 252. So, well, pardon me, just below that there. So, seeing some interesting action out of that. Remains in an actionable territory, not too overbought, and if anything, I do find that it's interesting that there's just not many stocks within the Dow right now that you've seen maintain a buy signal since the beginning of the year. So that definitely gets my vote of confidence for sure. And sitting up there, within the upper half, almost top third of the finance sector matrix, even having weekly momentum move back positive this week. Yeah, it's
Yeah, no,
one
that one
that
looks
I
good.
think checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, I think that one looks pretty good as well. A name that I was looking at earlier that I can't believe it's still running is Caterpillar. Stocks up 18% this year, almost 20 after today. Machinery and tools. I mean, like this isn't your typical go-go stock, if you were to call it that. You're like mega growth, high flyer,
Right.
all the people that are on Robinhood or whatever it is, like young individual investors that are just getting started. This isn't coming across their dashboard as like Caterpillar.
Exactly.
But this
No.
stock has put up tremendous gains. I mean, listen to this. So in the past 5 years, counting this year. So December, call it 2019, it was up 16. 2020, it was up 23. 21, it was up 14. 2022, it was up 16. And then if you go back prior to 2018, which was the last year it was down, it was up 70% in 2017 and then 36% in 2016. So, I mean, this is just like monumental gains for an individual name that's an industrial stock, all things considered. It's really not catching headlines or catching the flare that a lot of these other stocks did.
No, especially not compared to your Microsofts and Apples and Googles of the world. It does not get nearly the amount of attention that, especially from younger investors, by no means.
Like ourselves.
But it is intriguing though that I would find it an interesting sort of study to take those returns, cover up the name, and then ask somebody what stock within the Dow would you think these returns are for, and I would genuinely think that most wouldn't even have Caterpillar in their top 10, as a possibility. So extremely
David,
intriguing to find that.
Would you believe me, over the past 3 years between Caterpillar, Apple, Microsoft, and Meta, that Caterpillar outperformed them all by at least 45%?
No.
And that is just price return.
Yeah.
Over the past 3 years, Caterpillar's up 97.
And they get the benefit of total return.
And then total return is going to benefit Caterpillar probably a bit more. So, I mean, anyways, that would be on my starting lineup for the Dow. It reversed up today, a bit more overbought than Visa for sure right here, but momentum looks to be really strong for it still.
Yeah, and probably the last one that I would even look at, or at least has shown quite a bit of positive action here recently, been able to maintain a buy signal with a lot of recent negative action in the month of August, is Boeing, sitting there at a 3 for 5er. Hasn't, I wouldn't say wowed people this year compared to many other names, especially when you're looking at, I think somebody was talking about Nvidia earlier today being up over 200%, and still having a PE ratio that was within range of just being called a low growth stock or something down like that. Yeah, but
it's actually come down because forward earnings were raised. Yeah,
Boeing may not be getting as much attention as some names in the Dow, but has maintained a buy signal since the latter part of March. 3 consecutive buy signals. Most recent clearing a level of resistance that dated back to February. Right now sitting at 228, just above the middle of the trading band. But among the 3 that we have talked about, probably within the most actionable range. I mean, it's sitting right at about 20% overbought, so really wouldn't even call that overbought per se for us when we're looking at it. But is another one that we could toss in there. And I know the last one we both talked about, and it's sort of, would say definitely has gotten a lot of attention with the Dow, has been JP Morgan, JPM. Still sitting at a 4 for 5er. Ideally, if someone were looking to add to it, would probably look for it to reverse back into X's, but
banks definitely looks some of the best. I think technically right here, like big pullback prior to prior resistance. I like this one, I think, far more than any other of the big banks right now, at least technically. I agree with you on that. Yeah. Well, cool. David, you got any other stocks, anything other market related?
Not off the top of my head that I could easily wrap up in a couple of minutes.
Cool. Well, I guess we'll call it done then. We appreciate the attention and listenership per usual. Everyone, if you do have questions, you want to reach out to us, happy to do so. Listen to David and I. We love doing our morning videos throughout the week. If you're going to be in Vegas, we look forward to that. Reach out to us. We're definitely going to try to meet up there. So all that said, hope you enjoy the weekend. We'll be with you all next week.